I wanted to run through, touch base on some of the bits that we spoke about during the live. I found some of the stuff that you mentioned incredibly fascinating, and I wanted to understand a little bit more about that. But the caloric model was the highlight of today. But yeah, I wanted to get into the weeds. Hello, health seekers. Welcome to another episode of the Keto Pro podcast with myself, Richard Smith. Today, I am joined with Alan Reeves, no stranger to our channel. And today we're honored with the presence of Professor Bart Kay. Professor Bart Kay, thank you very much for coming on board.
Well, thank you very much for having me. Sorry, Al, what was that?
Hello, sir.
Oh, hello. Yes, it's good to meet you, finally, and all of that. Yeah, this will be fun, I'm sure, and we'll get to the weeds when we get to the weeds. But yeah, it's a privilege to be here.
So, gents, let's get to the crux of it. So, the reason that I wanted to have this talk today was about the caloric model, calories in versus calories out, a model that most people abide to and believe in. One I believe is highly flawed because I consume a stupid amount of food now, way more than I ever consumed when I was clinically obese. You know, Bart, you can add considerably more to this, but it can't be the calories. But I believe that energy in some form needs to be accounted for, but I don't know how we can account for that energy. How do we account for that energy? And one of the things that Professor Kay went into during the Carnivore Live that we went into was how we measure or what a calorie is. Could you go into that detail again, Professor Kay? Because I know you mentioned about the BOM calorimeter.
Let's absolutely go there. Often what gets forgotten is looking at the very first principles, the underlying cornerstones in the foundation of the whole concept. The concept that we're being offered by the calories in, calories out folks is that this is a tool which a person can use safely and effectively to have a predictable effect over their body composition in a relatively predictable period of time. That assertion is false for the most part, I believe, because of what they are looking at, what they are measuring, how they are doing that. And to understand where it all falls down, you need to go through the first principles. But basically, to make a very long story much, much shorter, calories in, calories out is not a useful tool for the person at home to use, largely because it is impossible for said person at home to accurately assess how many calories they genuinely have consumed. So it's said to be consumed. We'll get to that in a minute. Neither are they able to accurately gauge how many so-called calories they have so-called burned or expended or lost, however you want to term it. So if you can't measure how many are going in or how many are going out, how on God's green earth do you use that as a tool to predictably do anything with your body composition? Well, here's what you do. You make the undercutting of what you have been eating as so-called maintenance hitherto, you undercut that by so much that now you can feel safe about predicting, oh, this is what's going to happen. You're going to lose some body fat in the short term, but it's not sustainable because typically what we have to do is carve at least 500 of these so-called calories off someone's intake to feel like, oh, that's because if you don't, then anything could happen because of the error, the signal to noise error around this thing. And so that's what these calories in, calories out folk are peddling. They're peddling you a diet which is vastly destitute in its makeup in terms of your needs, which they're referring to as a caloric deficit, as if that's a good thing. No. Let me ask you this, Richard, just for fun. How much does a calorie weigh?
I think you asked me this during the live, if I remember correctly. I asked you
specifically about what a photon weighs during the other
It was indeed a photon, which was zero, wasn't it?
That's right. The rest mass of a photon is zero. Ergo, the rest mass of any number of photons is also zero. But can you tell me how much a calorie weighs?
I'm going to take a stab in the dark and say zero again.
Good guess. Guess it's zero. Absolutely no weight. No mass, it's energy, so-called, that we're talking about here. A calorie is a measurement of energy. Energy is a construct. It's something that physicists cannot yet even explain what it is, other than to provide a self-serving definition that says it's that motive force that provides for work. So, okay, thanks for that. But what is it? Why does it happen? What is this thing this thing called energy? What it actually turns out is that energy is an umbrella term for all the various different forms of work. The thing that's actually being measured to say how many so-called energy units are being used. And energy can be described in terms of a calorie or a joule, or, there are many different flavors of currency that people are talking about when they're talking about energy. Calorie is one of those. Specifically, what is it? It is a measurement of heat energy specifically in the form of heat. It's not a measurement of how much effective energy is in a foodstuffs that a human being can absorb and use for its biological purpose. Neither does it bear much relationship to that, actually. It is purely a measurement of how much heat could be released from 1 gram of that food if we put it inside, here it comes, the bomb calorimeter, and we nuke it with an electrical voltage such that it vaporizes basically instantly, producing carbon dioxide and water and heat, photons, which weigh how much, Al, by the way?
0.
That's right. Oh. So the calorie cannot affect the weight of a person's body. It weighs nothing. Add any number of calories you like that's made of photons and nothing else, specifically. Ergo, its spatial dimension and its weight is nothing whatever. Ergo, it cannot affect your weight. Your weight being the force exerted on a weighing scale by the mutually attractive force of your body and the Earth under the pseudo force of gravity, which is actually a curvature in space-time, but that's for another day. The only way to affect your weight, up or down, is to gain or to lose matter from your body. That which has a mass and a spatial dimension, not photons, which have neither.
It's a big margin for error when we're using the caloric value.
But
So,
Bart, do you think, so if people go carnivore, are they guaranteed to lose weight, or can they gain weight on carnivore?
In general, what we experience mostly is that people's hormonal systems return to their biological design as their body frees itself of the inflammation, the burden of chronic systemic inflammation that they've been carrying for years on their standard plant-containing diet, and then their hunger and satiety signalling, again, returns to its biological design, as does their inherent portion control, eating control, impulse control, and it becomes an absolutely no stress, no discipline required. This is not even difficult. I'm just following biological imperatives. And generally a person will end up losing fat, L, is what they'll lose. They'll lose fat on this diet. Is it possible for someone to gain fat on a carnivore diet? Yes, it's possible. It's just not very likely unless they're coming from a place that is so inherently messed up from where they've come from that they really probably ought to have got some professional advice on how to get that squared away. I'm available, by the way.
Yeah. We'll pop that link below. So I'm carnivore. I've been ketogenic for 10, maybe 11 years, 4 of which have been carnivore or predominantly animal-based. I'm probably more strict now than I've ever been. I eat an awful lot of food. Now, my weight does fluctuate, and I think this is the area that people get confused with.
Richard, here's what I'd suggest. Get the weighing scales out of your house.
Exactly. No, I agree.
Do you know,
this is what I say to my clients. So I'm not an advocate of weighing, I'm not an advocate of measuring, and I'm not an advocate of tracking.
Right.
Because these are tools that get in your way. It becomes addictive. Now, the reason that I used to weigh and measure was for competition purposes. And now I weigh just for the sake of having information in order to pass on to people.
Okay, what's the largest portion of your weight, Richard?
The water.
By a long way.
The water, yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's water. I mean, 65% plus of your body is water. Yeah. You can change your mass on a weighing scale by a pound if you want to go and urinate. You can do that.
For sure. Yeah.
You can do this. You can do the same thing by drinking a pint and a half at the local. That'll change your weight upwards.
Yeah.
You can change your weight by surgically removing your limbs if you want to. I got in trouble on Greg's channel for saying that, apparently, because he wanted to make it look like I was actually advocating for that. Good one, Greg. Your weight has many components. So why are we obsessed with it?
What I try to teach is intuitive eating the way that nature intended. And for me, that is animal-based. So that is eating the way that we've evolved our entire existence, concentrating on proteins and fats. And what I try to do, so there are groups of people who like to track. So I know like a lot of Alan's clients are obsessed with tracking, Al, and they and this is why I think maybe you incorporate that caloric model, because it's something that they understand. Am I right saying that, or
it's a tool? Yeah. It is a tool, isn't it? The calories in, calories out model is a tool. However, it is to its very core dishonest and disingenuous with the very people who are being asked to use that tool, because the people asking them to use that tool are failing to tell them that they will not get anywhere near accuracy, and as such we have to undercut their diet by such a large proportion to be sure we get the result that we are actually subjecting them to the very real risk of health problems born of insufficient nutrition. That's what's wrong with the model. Yeah. Before we talk about the physics of how calories don't weigh anything and neither do photons, so how can they change your weight on a scale? Before we talk about the fact that actually the first law of thermodynamics has nothing whatsoever to do with the situation of a human body, let alone of invoking the thing as an inviolate law that proves the calories model is correct. No. Most people that say that couldn't quote to you what the first law of thermodynamics even says, or even how many laws there are. They're always great questions to ask people. Great! Tell me how many laws of thermodynamics there are, if you don't mind.
I've written it down many times when you've said it, because I'm never going to say, oh, energy cannot be created or destroyed, because I know the real answer, but it's too complicated for me.
Right. But that's the thing, though, with folks in general, is these high priests of charlatanism who will get on board one of these ideas. Like, it's that simple. It's calories in, it's calories out. You can track both of those, even though there's no way you can. And I will be your guru. I will lead you to the light, and I will get you to where you're going. But actually, the method I'm going to use to get you there is to starve you, which is just stupid.
Well, that's the beauty of keto and carnivore, is you're eating highly nutritious quality food 3 times a day. That's what I would recommend, breakfast, lunch and dinner. And it works wonders. It worked wonders for me. I couldn't lose the weight, and I didn't change my training or anything. But once I went keto, the weight was falling off.
The other thing that comes to mind, guys, is I was just rifling through a magazine sitting on a flight a few weeks ago, and it was like images of cave paintings, and it was amazing to me how many fat Neanderthals there were, all with their calculators out, making sure that they've done their calories in, calories out for the day. Couldn't believe it, how many pictures of that I saw.
Yeah.
Right beside the pictures of them sitting around bowls of salad and chowing down on that.
I don't think they got those big bellies until the Egyptians, was it, when they discovered grains?
Correct.
Grains, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm.
Could I just change? I've got a few questions for you, if you don't mind, Bart.
Sure.
And one of them from a client was, what do you think to fruit and honey, as some other carnivore doctors like to recommend? And will the fruit cause a fatty liver?
Okay. Paul Saladino is completely, absolutely, utterly wrong. Completely wrong to suggest to people that fruit and honey is innocuous and good and 400 grams a day is great and you should do that too.
Yeah, I think he's lost the plot, doesn't he?
He has completely left the building. It's irresponsible. It's basically tantamount to malpractice. At least it would be if Paul Saladino had ever practiced medicine, which he hasn't.
Is he a psychologist, I think?
He has done 2 rotations. He has 2 specializations. One is in general medicine. The next one is in psychiatry, head shrinkery, basically. But he's not practiced either in either field.
I mean, for me being keto, and I often do targeted keto, that I may have 10 grams of honey before a workout, but that's 10 grams. It's, 2 teaspoons. He does talk of 300-400 grams of fruit in carbohydrates and honey. Of course, I would burn that off.
You are asking for a problem. Even if you are relatively active, you are still asking for a problem if you pour fructose down your neck in the amounts that Saladino is talking about and is doing. It's written all over his face if you want to go and have a look, and it will be written all over yours if you want to do the same thing. You meaning you, the great listener, whoever you might be out there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do not pile fruit down your neck.
1 spoon of honey before a workout is not going to give you this fatty liver.
I would suggest probably not, but I would also ask you why you think that's necessary.
Whether it's, I've tested it. You can get a little boost on a workout if you're doing high intensity training with that, I guess, insulin spike. Will honey spike insulin though, if it's mostly fructose, or is there glucose in honey?
There's a mixture of glucose and fructose in most honeys. It differs from place to place, even from hive to hive, depending on the flowers that have been used to gather up the nectar from.
Right.
One of the things that, I don't know if you saw this recently, Bart, but Dr. McCullough released a podcast with Georgie Dinkoff saying that long-term ketosis and carnivore low carb is detrimental to your health, which baffled me because Dr. McCullough has always been an advocate of keto. Now, one of the things that Dinkoff suggested is that fructose from honey works differently in the body compared to sugar. But the studies that we looked at showed that honey ingestion daily, around 50 grams per day, which was incremented, showed incremental increases in HbA1c and triglycerides. So one of the other studies that he referenced was Mexican Coca-Cola, which is made from cane sugar, I believe, and that these rats consumed the equivalent of 8,000 calories per day and did not gain any weight. But the conclusion from the study was that it had negatively impacted triglyceride levels. So no matter which spin you put on it, there was a negative impact on triglycerides and blood glucose from honey. So for me, it doesn't matter where it comes from, whether it's a candy bar or whether it's honey. I don't notice any benefit. You were saying that you notice an uplift. I mean, I've experimented over the years with carb cycling, carb loading. It only seems to hinder me. It definitely, for me, just myself, personal experience, but it never seems to increase my athletic ability. It only ever causes me gastro issues or makes me tired, which is the opposite to what it should be doing. But
so we don't need 400 grams of honey, basically.
No, we
Definitely
don't.
not.
No.